In today's video, we've got more information on one of the PlayStation 4's most anticipated exclusives of 2018 in Spider-Man. PlayStation VR looks to be getting a ton of support in 2018, and we've also got a nice update on Monster Hunter World coming from Capcom. Let's get right into this. For those of you that own a PlayStation 4, you're probably excited for the latest game from Insomniac, Spider-Man on the PS4. It is set to release this year, and more information on the title is coming out. And over on Brian Horton's Twitter page, who is the design director for Insomniac on Spider-Man, he was also the game director for Rise of the Tomb Raider, but he said a few days ago that he was finishing his third playthrough of Spider-Man on PS4, and that each playthrough has taken him multiple days to complete. Now, it's not certain whether this means the game is literally multiple days long and that it's a 48 to 72 hour long game. I wouldn't get that excited, but as a director for the game, you must assume that he was spending a considerable amount of time every day with the game, and I think many would be more than satisfied if Spider-Man was a 20 to 25 hour experience. And with what Brian Horton is saying, it looks to be around that trend. I would be very surprised if Spider-Man is like a 50-hour long game. Insomniac usually doesn't make games like that. Yes, Spider-Man is a bit more open than their previous games, but if you look at titles such as Ratchet & Clank and Resistance, those weren't huge, grandiose experiences. However, they did do Sunset Overdrive, and that was an open world title, and they have said that Spider-Man is far bigger than that game. So yeah, that would lead credence to the game being relatively long. And there's actually a studio-wide play session of Spider-Man being hosted at Insomniac. Think about how lucky those guys are. They're just going through and playing Spider-Man on PS4 already. And while that does sound very enticing to the consumers, keep in mind that these guys have been working on the game for years upon years. So at this point, they've probably already seen the game in action many times before. But I'm sure as they get closer to finishing this project, they're getting excited to see the finished product. And I'm sure the game is shaping up very nicely. Spider-Man on PS4 is set for a release in 2018. We don't have an official window. I think it makes the most amount of sense to bring this game out in the fall. Early in the year, we already have our big PlayStation 4 exclusive with God of War, and I think Spider-Man and God of War are two colossal games for the PlayStation 4 that you want to spread out those releases as far as possible, but there are so many highly anticipated exclusives coming to the PS4 in 2018 that spacing them out is going to be ideal. You don't want to overflow the market at once with too many of these exclusives, because some of them are going to get lost in the shuffle, especially when you look at all of the big third-party titles coming as well. I feel you release God of War in March of this year, Spider-Man should be a September or October title, and then you've got to fit in the release for Detroit Become Human somewhere in there as well. And those three titles to me are the defining exclusives for the PlayStation 4 in 2018. But from what I can see anecdotally, it seems like there is a higher level of anticipation coming from Spider-Man, and it's great to see what this game is shaping up to, and the fact that it has taken Brian Horton multiple days to complete it, that's very exciting in its own right. Moving on, PlayStation VR has been a big element to the PlayStation 4, however, it hasn't completely grabbed all gamers. It's still very expensive to get into PSVR, albeit prices have dropped down dramatically. Originally, back in 2016 when PlayStation VR launched, it was $400 just for the headset. Now you can find it readily available where you can get the PlayStation VR, you can get the camera, and then you can get a game like Gran Turismo Sport or Skyrim VR, and that'll all be $250 if you can find a decent sale. That has allowed VR to be a lot more accessible to the mainstream audience. However, given the fact that you still need a PlayStation 4, you need the VR on top of that, it's still very expensive that caters to a smaller audience. However, Sony is not giving up on it. In a statement sent to Nikkei, Sony Interactive Entertainment mentioned that it expects that before the end of 2018, the catalog for PlayStation VR titles will increase from 150 games available right now to a whopping 280 titles. That means without any delays, that would be 130 new VR titles. That is a staggering number. Now, of course, all of these games are not going to be AAA big budget sellers for VR. However, I'm sure you're going to have a couple of them sprinkled in there, and what we've seen with the quality of VR is that it's getting better and better. 2017, we saw some pretty cool games come out for PSVR. Farpoint, Skyrim VR, Gran Turismo Sport. While they weren't perfect games, there were nice additions to the VR's library, and if we can get more games like that in 2018, and you're just ramping up the quality, and probably by the end of 2018, the price of VR is just going to drop even more, it's going to make PSVR a lot more accessible to the entire PS4 audience, which day by day is growing at a rapid pace. It's great to see that Sony isn't giving up on PlayStation VR, because you've seen with Sony hardware in the past that they just give up on it outright. PlayStation Move didn't gain much traction. We don't have to talk about the PlayStation Vita, but it looks like with PlayStation VR, they are staying committed, and that's fantastic to see. Finally, we have some more information on Monster Hunter World, namely its first pack of DLC, and by the way, it is absolutely free. And with the release of the game coming very quickly, Capcom has reiterated the fact that regular content updates as well as major title updates are going to be available for absolutely free. They also mentioned that the first update will launch sometime in the spring, and it'll introduce the Devil Joe to the game. They said this, quote, "The Devil Joe must feed constantly and will devour anything in its way, even feeding on the largest of monsters. This wild beast really is one for only the bravest of hunters to take on." In an era of gaming where microtransactions and a lot of paid DLC content is becoming more and more prevalent, it is great to see that Monster Hunter World is gonna go the route of free DLC updates and free content patches, and who can ever complain about free content? Monster Hunter World officially launches on January 26th. It does release on the same day as Dragon Ball FighterZ, so I'm sure there's gonna be a little bit of competition depending on what game is gonna earn your dollars. But for a lot of you guys, I'm sure you're just gonna be picking up both. A great way to kick off the year. So that wraps up this video. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you think about Spider-Man on PS4 lasting multiple days? At least that's coming from the mouth of Brian Horton. Have you picked up PlayStation VR yet? If so, have you enjoyed your time with it? If not, is 2018 the year you do so? And let us know your thoughts on Monster Hunter World. Sound off in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.